Hi, how's it going? I really am encouraged by you guys giving us your attention. I know it's late in the day, but this is going to be arguably the best conversation you've heard for the last 48 hours. I can guarantee you that. So just a quick intro to me. I'm Tim. I do a thing called Your Basket is Empty. We are equal parts consulting and content. On the consulting side, we work with digital agencies and help them grow and scale by offering fractional leadership services. And on the content side, we aim to inform, inspire, and entertain the modern commerce community with a podcast and newsletter and events like these. I highly recommend you all go and check it out at yourbasketisempt.com. Today, we're going to be talking about and unpacking Paul Smith's journey to headless. I'm hoping you're going to leave with a better understanding of what that looks like and maybe even some sort of replatform project. To help us out, we're joined by Hannah Bennett, Head of Digital at Paul Smith. We're going to discuss her experience for about 20 minutes, and then we're going to open up the floor to some questions, about 5 minutes, and then we're going to close it out. Does that sound good? Great. Let's start from the top, Hannah.
Yeah.
You guys were open source Magento. You decided to move to headless. Why did you make that decision? And I'm most curious about what problems headless solves for you guys.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, we went headless 18 months ago, and I think we need to kind of go back a bit further. So it was around 2019, we were experimenting with AMP at the time. That was like the latest new trend to kind of work on for your site, and we just quickly realized that didn't suit a commerce site for us, and that's when we started hearing about PWA and headless. And at that time, I was just coming into my role as head of digital and frustrated with our Magento infrastructure on the front end, especially UX. We were very designed by committee, restricted to templates. You could put your logo over Paul Smith, we could be anyone else. So for me, headless was a real opportunity to kind of grapple our brand and say who we are and control that brand experience, storytelling. I think it's such a rich feature we have. Like, we're not a multi-brand. We've got Paul, he's a real person, very much involved in how we need to present ourselves and sell our products. So for headless, initially it was, how do we come across as Paul Smith the brand? How can we start stitching together that best-in-class services that we have? We joined an agency, LimeSharp, to really help us with that and to kind of get their experience and kind of join them together with our brand. So.
Right. We're very close to the Magento stand, so that's quite convenient and interesting. So I know the Centra guys are here. Talk me through that process in terms of the RFP. How did you go about that project and like bringing the platform conversation to the rest of the team? How did that work?
Yeah, so Headless was its standalone project for UX and UI and brand, and then I was aware that we had an in-house development team, that we were then, how do we push that great new site we've got? How can we get a great checkout, delivery, localization? And our developers were busy building features, and we shouldn't be doing that. We are not a loyalty brand, we're not an OMS, we're a fashion brand. So starting to look at more kind of off the shelf. Initially it went down into, we need an OMS product, and that's when we were introduced to Centra via LimeSharp. And it really solved a lot of those kind of future problems that I was faced against, as well as quickly delivering the OMS piece that we knew was the next step. We've got a retail network across the globe, and I think with Centra's localization, it was, and the OMS that's kind of inbuilt, it was a bit of a no-brainer. So it was initially to do an OMS problem with my kind of experience of where we were with Magento at the time, that there was kind of legs in this for the future. So we did speak to competitors, we spoke to Shopify, we spoke to Big, and for me, Centra was just ticking a lot of boxes. It was specifically for fashion brands. It was a really great company in terms of their pitch and how they were listening to our problems, not just telling us what they do. So yeah, that's kind of how we found Centra and why we decided to kind of embark on a replatforming post doing the Headless project. Like, our checkout, for example, is still not headless, and it's awful. So I'm very much looking forward to that.
Interesting. We were talking before about the idea that you were given quite a lot of freedom with that RFP process, which I think is quite unusual for a big project of that nature.
Yep.
Why do you think you were given that freedom, and do you think that that helps when some of that decision making?
Yeah, I probably don't realise how lucky I am, and we are very much proudly an independent company still. Paul is very much involved. I was telling you just now, he comes to the office every day, he's working in our shops on a Saturday. So we haven't got that big investment board kind of breathing over us, and I've got a really close relationship with our CEO, CFO, and they give me a lot of trust. I think I've been at Paul Smith 15 years now, so I know I've worked in multiple roles across e-commerce, and I think they trust my experience there. So I'm quite lucky in the sense that they trust what I'm saying, and I think we've built a good relationship with Centra to kind of move it forward. So yeah, from there we go through commercials, go through legal, and it fits.
So we've talked a lot about the platform. I'm curious about the rest of the tech that surrounds that. What was your decision making when it came to the rest of the tech stack? And I'm curious because I've been involved in RFP projects where there's a lot of legacy tech that's kind of like brought into that. You know, you might be on an old contract or whatever it was. Did you have any of that, or did you have a clean slate? Talk to me about the rest of the tech stack other than the platform.
I know composable is like the buzzword that everyone that's a brand here especially will be pitched at as being composable, and we didn't actually realize we were composable until we were at a Mac conference, Mac 1 last year, and it's like, oh, hang on, we're already using Clearview for search, we're already using Cloudinary to support our B2B platform. So I think for me, it's that using best-in-class systems and bringing them together. So currently, we're on Magento currently, moving to Centra, and then we have Cloudinary as our DAM, Clearview for search, merch, Rex, Adyen. They're the kind of key players. Storyblock, we should mention them for our CMS.
Yep.
So yeah, for us, a lot of that review was over the headless part. So back to my point that we built everything in-house. We had our own CMS that we built over the years.
Interesting.
And the challenge there is it gets neglected because the developers are then working on the next thing and the next thing. So from a headless is where we took the real opportunity to review who we use and where Storyblock came in, and then Clearview, we just started small and see how they perform, and then compare them around competitors that they were using or we were using at the time, and slowly move over. So now that the Centra replatform's happening, we feel quite stable with our composable landscape, let's say, and looking to bring new things in. So delivery experience and how that kind of supports our warehouse, for example, for shipping orders.
So you touched on a really interesting point, and my understanding is that a lot of brands look at other competitors and the tech that they're using to inform their tech decisions.
Yeah.
How much of that did you do, or do you kind of work in isolation?
I mean, I go to events and it's really good to hear who people are using, but I don't take that as like, oh my God, Burberry are using this, drop everything, I need to change. I think for me, it's working really closely with Lime Sharp, our agency. We have a great working relationship with them. We have a hybrid development team. So gaining that experience from who they've got experience with versus what do our customers want, and go from there. So yeah, I think it's good to kind of keep your eyes out who are people are using, but always go back to what you're trying to deliver to your customer. What can your team actually do with those tools, rather than just having all the bells and whistles that you can't actually use.
So I want to switch gears away from tech a little bit. I'm curious about the timing of the replatforming process. Like, when did you start thinking about it? I know you're kind of in build. What have kind of some of the key milestones been? Just to give the audience a sense, anyone that's considering a replatforming, especially of this size, like what sort of timeframes can they expect? Yeah,
so we have an e-com and B2B platform. They're very independent to instances. So that was always in my mind that if we are replatforming, I can't just leave B2B behind. I think that was one of the nice things during the pitch from Centra is like, oh, you don't have to build a headless front end for B2B. Where do I sign? Like, we don't need a headless front end for B2B. So we started conversations, I think it was October last year. Yeah, Max is nodding when we met. We signed in the end of Jan, and we are going to go live with B2B next month, so that's a month away. I think the fact that I'm here and able to be here shows that that's going well. And that's mainly timed due to our selling seasons. We've got 4 selling seasons pre-main for each season. And then e-com is going live in February next year. So it's 12 years of Magento that we're unpicking. and I think how that fits into the warehouse. So that explains the timeline for me. We've got peak. No one wants a new platform on Black Friday, so allow time for testing.
Allow time for testing. Sage advice.
Yeah.
So you talked before about the freedom that you had with the RFP process being an independent company, but I'm curious, like, what did that internal process look like? There must be a governance structure of some. Does Paul sign off on Centra and CMSs? Does he get that involved?
He's not that involved.
Okay.
He sticks to the nice, like the collaborations and how beautiful the store is.
Okay. The boring stuff.
Yeah, the boring stuff. So there's a head of IT within our structure. I work really closely with him. He's got a lot of experience of that more DevOps side and how we bring that in. So between us, we kind of really agree on what we can move, what can't. We have a web development manager. We work really closely, and a great project manager who's in the audience. And so from then it goes to CFOs to kind of talk around the risks, benefits, and costs. So it's that kind of value, time, quality triangle that gets discussed in those meetings, and then.
So something that I'm picking up within the market, I don't know if anyone here is agency side, it probably applies to tech as well, but is your CFO getting more involved in decision making over the last year and a bit?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah, definitely.
Okay. Maybe some advice to the audience as to how they can navigate that conversation?
Join the conversation early, I would say, and like bring them in. If they're going to be involved, get them involved from the start. Don't bring them in at the end where it's just like, this is how much it costs. It's got a few nice things. Like, let them hear your pain points when you're speaking to those providers, I think is a really good advice. So yeah, we have a financial planning director that works alongside the CFO. So he's in a lot of meetings and really straddles that conversation between brand and commerce, which is like, I think if there's brands in the audience will know that they butt heads quite a lot, so yeah.
So you've talked about it having an internal team, and my assumption would be you're at the scale where a lot of the decisions might be kind of outsource or build. Mm-hmm. How are you kind of navigating that now that you're on this journey? Are you likely to want to start bringing more of that in-house as you go ahead, or do you want to see how that plays out? Like, what's some of the thinking? Obviously not getting into anything too sensitive.
Yeah, so we were always so proud of our in-house development team. I think at one time that we had 10 members across junior to senior developers, project management and management, and that was in place for a good 10 years within Paul Smith. And I think it was probably 2 years ago when we knew we wanted to go on this headless journey that couldn't last. And I think we really hit lucky finding Lime Sharp. So initially they were just brought in for UX and UI and maybe a bit of headless advice to kind of upskill our developers. And now I think we quickly realized that we don't know all the answers. We need to bounce across the team, get their experience. You can't beat seeing a site that an agency have got live and going like, I want that, how do you translate that for us? And we work really hard together. I think there's a lot of respect, a lot of trust. So I think we're really happy now. Our in-house team is 3 developers, a project manager, and that feels a really nice size now with Lime Sharp, where we can then scale on projects if we need to use their kind of their developers effectively when we need to concentrate on UX, or rather than parking things, we can like really juggle that roadmap together. So yeah, I'm really happy with how we've worked that out.
So how would you advise other brands or people going through that replatform process to engage an agency? Like with the CFO, should they engage them earlier? Should you use consultants before you start getting into kind of agency land? I suppose, what's been some of your experience? And it could have been from previous times at Paul Smith.
Yeah, we've never done consultancy in terms of bigger replatform projects. I think we went down more the contractor route rather than consultancy, and that fell flat in his face. I wouldn't never touch a contractor again in that sense to do build.
When you say contractor, do you mean freelancer?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Are there any freelancers in the audience? Okay.
I always have to be careful what I say. So I think from me, I think our experience, our business logic, and then the relationship we've had with Lime Sharp didn't need that consultancy advice. I think that they're kind of on the pulse of what's needed, and then I'm really nosy and like to get involved as well. But I think bringing those stakeholders, defining them early, making sure they know they're a stakeholder was really important.
And then talk to me about like milestone planning with your partners. Like, how do you kind of figure that out? You've talked a little bit about the time frame, but like, are you working with them closely during certain periods when you're doing this kind of project? And does it kind of like waver as you go?
Yeah, really closely, and I guess good project management you can't beat. So we have a project manager on the Paul Smith side, and LimeSharp and Centra, and they have daily, weekly contact, and then we have monthly face-to-face where we're really kind of, tell me what's worrying you, tell me what's not working, what's not in the plan that should be, and doing those monthly. So it is really kind of intense conversations, I think, between all teams to kind of get to those milestones and breaking down to the different areas of the site. So.
And then going back to the other wider stakeholder, how have the other bits of the tech stack been involved, or does that kind of get shifted over to you and the agency in Centra? Like, do you have contact with Clevu during this kind of process, or it's kind of plug and play, you guys have been using it?
Yeah,
hands off?
I mean, we really like to keep them in the conversation, and you don't know what you don't know is kind of the motto, and never assume is a Paul Smith motto. So making sure they know why you're moving, trying to get access to other brands that are doing the same thing. Like with Centra, the big change in my mindset is the shift to markets rather than store views for localization. So great, we're using Storyblock, they're connected, but how are your brands actually configuring your Storyblock setup to make it work for our content team? So I think all the brands we're working with have been really open of sharing their client base, and brands are really open to connecting to kind of understand the product.
So, and that's a really interesting point. Did you talk to any brands before you made some of these decisions, like reference brands?
Yeah, you get the reference calls that people give you, and it's like, great, yeah, I know why you've been picked. So it's trying to kind of go around the edges a little bit and hear on the grapevine of who you're working with. But yeah, I always try and speak to brands, and I'm always happy to do brand reference calls myself because I know how valuable they are. So yeah, speaking to brands before and during, I think are really valuable.
And yeah, that's a really interesting point. Like, how do you go around the references that are served up to you? Like, do you have a bank of like your own mates who are in your world that you kind of consult with?
Yeah, there's a really good community that I'm part of within a company called Commerce Futures that do a really good job of connecting brands. I find that personally really valuable. And through agency as well, like I know other providers for other tech that we've considered over the past, like LimeSharp, you've got a client using this, can you connect us? That's kind of one way of kind of going around the edges of finding out some real talk.
Yeah, nice. We're coming up to about 20 minutes, so I've got a couple more questions, then we'll open up the floor. My experience is that replatforming is fraught with anxiety. I suppose first off, do you agree with that? Secondly, what are your top tips for brands and or agencies who are about to embark on such a project and avoid that sort of anxiety?
Yeah, completely anxiety, but I think for me it ebbs and flows. Like when we have those big in-person meetings where we're getting everything on the table, I think that really settles us. I can see Ellie nodding as well, our project manager. So they really help, making sure you're bringing people in person. I don't think you can beat that if you can do face-to-face. Centra do a great job of kind of joining those as well. And then in terms of tips, I always find that a really hard question to answer because you're just doing it. So thinking about that, I think it's, again, to that stakeholder point, make sure you're getting the right people around the table, share the load. One thing we do within the team, we have an e-commerce team of about 15 people. Early on, we're telling them about the move, even though it's not going to touch them for another 12 months, and making them become mini project managers themselves, like product owners within the team. And then I would say, I think understand why you're doing the project. What problems are you trying to solve, and iterate those changes. Like, don't get sidelined by the presentations and the sales pitch of what you can do. Concentrate on the migration first, and then, okay, let's do that nice kind of ship from store feature that we really want to do. So, yeah.
So I think we've pretty much covered off the journey to some degree. What would you have done differently?
I wish I had a little bit more time for Tender on the kind of outskirt problems. So Centra is solving a ton of problems for us in terms of how we can rapidly deliver features, but I would have maybe liked more time of how that interacts with the warehouse. So I think it's, not just my team, but the areas of the business that it then impacts, so the retail and the warehouse and parts like that. Not necessarily a problem, but I wish I'd had more time maybe to kind of dedicate to that, or at least bring them in earlier into that part of the conversation.
And are you working with any consultants on that, or that's all internal departmental stuff?
Yeah, internal departments. So we're quite lucky that we have like distribution in-house, huge warehouse in Nottingham. So yeah, all internal. The challenges of Brexit and shipping cross-border and
that's another discussion.
Yeah, that's another.
Yeah,
that's
we can
another
leave Brexit
expo.
for another day. Yeah. We've got about 5 minutes left. Has anyone got any questions? Ed, you might have a question.
He made it.
Thanks for the kind words, Hannah. What are you most excited about from the Centra launch, and also how do you think Centra is going to help unlock that kind of omni-channel experience with all the amazing stores that you have?
So I'm most excited about the checkout. I think if people go on our website now, it's like it's fast, it's nice, and then you get to our checkout and it's slow and it's clunky and it's not reflective. Everyone's used to these quick delivery experience checkouts. So I think really bespoking our checkout for our customers and our localization. Markets is a feature I'm really excited in, like our VIP customer loyalties. Obviously, every brand wants to nail loyalty, and I think we currently can't. So having that VIP market and that view of the site for those customers, I'm really excited about that as kind of quick wins.
Can you talk a little bit more? Oh, sorry, go for it.
Oh, and performance. Core Web Vitals. We need to pass Core Web Vitals.
Hey, I was just wondering, like kind of looking ahead, obviously on the back of the question just asked, are there any kind of problems that you're already future-proofing against, whether it's attribution with composable and local markets and stuff? Are you already kind of in that headspace? Is there anything that you're thinking about now ahead of the launch that it's kind of worth also mentioning?
Sorry, it's quite hard to hear. Headaches with?
Sorry, with post-launch, so composable commerce and attribution problems, with the headless setup. Are you already kind of future-proofing, and is there any advice there for any of us who are kind of on this journey to look at in kind of, a year's time already?
I think that was definitely a learning we took from the headless build. We had a period of time where we just didn't allow enough time to concentrate on the SEO and the channel attribution. So that's something we've definitely put into our plan for this time. Yeah, I think we're doing it really well now with serverless tracking within Tag Manager. So I think it's just making sure you're scheduling time for that within the roadmap.
Hi, firstly, I do have to say you've got the most amazing laugh. It reminds me of one of my family members.
You've got a great laugh.
You've got a great laugh. So I have a question. So you mentioned earlier about your checkout experience not being the best at the moment. How are you influencing your customers throughout the online journey in terms of there's so much choice available on your website, but how are you presenting the right choices to them at the right time and so forth?
I'd say currently there's definitely lots of opportunities, and I think we're going to be working with a platform called Hindered for delivery experience of how that's integrated with our product catalog to show the kind of upsells and like the sustainable options of delivery. So that's something that we could definitely do more. We work really closely with Clevo on recommendations and how that's doing. So I think once we've kind of got our headspace past these big replatforms, it is that CRO project and where we can really get into A/B testing of what's converting a customer. So that's kind of roadmap for me.
Any more questions? Down the front here. I think this might be the last one. We're at 24 minutes.
He gets a question from wearing Paul Smith as well.
There you go.
Thanks. So 2 passions in life, my Paul Smith sock collection and web performance. What would you say to people? Obviously I work in a similar industry and a lot of people think going headless just guarantees them better performance. What would you say to those people?
I'd say it doesn't guarantee you performance. I think we're seeing that. I mentioned Core Web Vitals is a real thing we need to pass to get that speed to site. So I think it's making sure you're working really closely with your developers and that technology. You're looking at lighthouse scores and seeing how you can optimize those. But ultimately, if your platform and legacy infrastructure is not fast, you're never going to achieve that. If that answers your question. I don't know what the second question was, sorry. All right.
One question. All right, I think that's a great way to end it. Just before we go, big thank you to Centra. You've heard a bit about them today, I think, for putting on this event, and a big round of applause for Hannah. Thanks, guys.